The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
Illinois colleges in crisis. Students are pleading for help as scholarship money dries up and state universities lay off workers, all because of the stalemate in Springfield. A war of words. The Chicago Public Schools and the Teachers Union ratchet up their rhetoric as negotiations for a new contract stall, and the governor threatens a hostile takeover. And throwing punches in Englewood, keeping kids in the ring and out of trouble. Meet the woman who's in their corner. Stay with us for these stories and much more tonight on In the Loop. Good evening. I'm Chris Bury. The budget crisis in Illinois is creating more and more collateral damage. The state's 12 public universities and 48 community colleges are running out of cash and fast. Some are threatening to close. Enrollment is taking a hit. Financial aid for more than 120,000 low-income students is on hold, and the very future of higher education here is in question. For some students at Chicago State University, the frustration is boiling over. Last week, a group of them interrupted morning traffic on the Dan Ryan Expressway. The protesters said they wanted Illinois lawmakers to hear their concerns about scholarship money getting cut off because of the budget stalemate. The crisis is hurting low-income students at state colleges and universities who depend on help from the Monetary Award Program, or MAP. The MAP grants have been frozen at the state's 12 universities, leaving about 125,000 students in limbo. In the Chicago area, Governor State and South Suburban University Park and Chicago State University on the city's south side are hardest hit. State funding for many programs has dried up since Illinois legislators have been unable to agree on a budget. Dr. Thomas Calhoun, president of Chicago State, says the school depends on Springfield for nearly a third of its $120 million a year budget.
We are exhausting reserve funds, if you will, and we have been fortunate that we've been able to get 7 months into the fiscal year in the absence of state funds. But we are pressed now because obviously our yearly budget included state funds that we've not received.
The budget crisis is so dire that Chicago State's president says the university will have to make drastic cuts and possibly even close until it gets the state money.
We, even in anticipation of this, we have had some reduction in force, so there have been some layoffs. The fact of the matter is that, you know, our budget expected a $39 million appropriation from the state. It's very difficult to find $39 million that you can cut out by not buying paper clips or not buying staples.
And the lingering budget crisis is having a domino effect throughout the entire state university system. Madeline Dubeck is Chief Operating Officer of the government watchdog group Reboot Illinois.
We've heard reports that high school counselors are now telling high school students in the state of Illinois, go to a school out of state because there's no guarantee that anything is going to be operating here, that there's going to be any stability or funding. And, you know, if you think about most of the communities where these public universities and public community colleges are located, there are entire businesses that exist because of the university.
Paris Griffin is a senior at Chicago State, majoring in public relations and president of the Student Government Association. Adrian Mercado is a junior majoring in communications. He relies heavily on a MAP grant to pay for his education. On this day, they are recruiting fellow students to call lawmakers in Springfield.
A lot of students are really shocked and confused because it really seems like the government does not value us or our education. So it's really been a question as to what can we do to show the government, Governor Rauner, the legislators, that Chicago State University is very important to not only the students, but the surrounding community, faculty, staff as well.
Without the MAP grant, overall, it's just very inconvenient for a lot of us because we're so used to getting MAP grants and we're so used to receiving this extra help.
The most needy students are not getting the monetary award program grants that they had been promised. Those are students who cannot go to school without a little bit of financial aid and who are aspiring to do better in life.
Enrollment numbers at state schools have taken a hit. More than 1,000 students who depend on grants failed to return to classes this semester. Earlier this week, Illinois Comptroller Leslie Munger sounded the alarm about the lasting impact of the stalemate in Springfield.
The long-term ramifications for the state are even more concerning, because by spending more as we bring in billions less, we are making it even more difficult for our state to create a pathway that will allow us to regain our fiscal footing and keep our promises to fund education, social services, public safety, and infrastructure in the future.
But for now, those promises are not being kept, and the students of Chicago State University say they will keep pushing until the state's leaders honor their commitments to helping those least able to afford college educations.
We're going to continue to fight. We can't allow our futures to be thrown away in a political game of chess, so we have to continue to fight. We don't have a choice.
A new bill would release more than $700 million for state schools, including money for MAP grants, but the Senate President, John Cullerton, is holding off sending it to the governor. He's asking Governor Rauner to ponder his threat to veto the legislation. And joining us to talk about all this are Dorothy Tucker, reporter for CBS 2 Chicago, Ted Dabrowski, Vice President of Policy for the Illinois Policy Institute, and Amisha Patel, Executive Director for Grassroots Collaborative. Hello and welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
So, grants, these MAP grants for low-income people. Dorothy, let me start with you. This would seem like a no-brainer, right? These kids have already qualified for these grants. Is this one issue that Democrats and Republicans at least ought to be able to agree on?
You would think, because the one thing that I see, on the one hand, you know, we complain about the violence in the communities. You know, we complain about the fact that the young kids are out on the street and they don't have anything to do. And then you have these students who are doing something, who are trying to better their lives, you know, who perhaps at one time were right there on the fence and they made the right choice. They decide to go to Chicago State, to Governor State, to Eastern, to Western. They make that choice because they have an opportunity because of the scholarships, because of the MAP scholarships, you know, and that decision right there puts them on the right track. And then we turn around and we say, well, not going to give you the money.
Well, so Governor Rauner is threatening to veto this bill. Ted, is that something he should do?
Well, I think the whole discussion about this needs to be flipped on its head. And I think the real problem is what universities in Illinois and across the nation have done with the money they receive. That's what's not being discussed. And I totally agree with Dorothy about these people who are trying hard to get on the right track. But the problem is that tuitions at all these universities have doubled in the last decade. The schools, the universities have taken all the money and just pumped up administration. They've pumped up salaries. If you look at the pensions, if you look at
But why should these low-income kids pay the price for that?
But the point is that the real problem is that the universities are not spending all that money they have well. They shouldn't be jacking up the tuitions such that kids need a scholarship. It used to be that you could work and go to school. Now the tuitions are so high that there's not enough money. And the big driver in all this is pensions. Pensions now, despite the fact that the state has increased spending on education for higher ed by 60%, it's all going to pensions. It's not making it to the classroom, it's not making it to grants, because every dollar is being sucked up by pension costs.
Amisha, do you think this is one issue that can actually force some kind of a compromise or not?
Well, I think we'll see. It's really hard to see how any compromise happens in this situation. I think to what Ted's point around pensions, though, the crisis here wasn't created by, a retired teacher having a $30,000 pension living off of that. Like, that's not what created this moment. We have to really look at issues of revenue, how much money is coming into the system, where is that money coming from, and are people paying their fair share? That's a conversation we're not having, but we need to have if we're going to address the budget crisis in Illinois.
Just to the MAP grants, Ted, do you think that the governor ought to veto this appropriation of the
Well, the state's in a really tough bind, right? So this problem, this crisis has been going on for years, not just at the state level, but at the university level. And so what Rauner is saying is that we don't have money. If they put that money there, where's the money coming from? Is it going to come from social services, public safety? They're in a real bind up there, and they need to come together on a plan that actually fixes Illinois' problems. I don't think they can just nickel and dime and figure out how to solve individual problems like just by passing bills with money they don't have.
But it's almost like they're not thinking about the faces. They're not thinking about the thousands of students who are going to be hurt if they don't. If he vetoes this budget, he needs to consider what the ripple effect of that, and it's going to be huge. Isn't there a way to figure out some kind of way past the budget and then deal with the problems of overspending, of inflation, call it what you want, deal with that on another level, but give these kids what they want so that they can remain in school?
I think the big issue is that this is what happens with the Illinois government. They want more money all the time, and they never reform. Universities, look at the top pay of the head of the U of I, $800,000 in total compensation. Take the community college, Lewis and Clark. The top pay, full compensation for the leader, $500,000. There is something wrong with that system when we can't afford to give kids a fair tuition, and yet you've got this administrative bloat across all universities. Where now, like Chicago State, for example, you have one administrator for every 18 students. I didn't say professor, administrator. One administrator for every 18 students. It's out of whack.
These are all big issues and somewhat even separate from the MAP grants. We've got another education crisis in the city. At first, the teachers union leaders said the school system presented a serious contract offer, but then the bargaining committee rejected it, and teachers union president Karen Lewis had this to say.
And this speaks again to the lack of trust. In our last agreement, we had language that looked pretty good, but they were able to get around it and do other things that negated the strength of our contract.
And now after this rejection, CPS has come back and said it's going to require teachers to contribute more to their pensions and announced $75 million in budget cuts. Amisha, are we headed for an inevitable teacher strike here in Chicago?
Well, I think it's looking like it might be in that direction. I think what you see happening right now is that teachers are standing up for making sure there are enough teachers in the classrooms, that class sizes do remain at a number where students can really learn, and that they're really fighting to say, wait, we've got to actually talk about revenue into the school district. The biggest question right now is the financial situation of Chicago Public Schools, and if we're not talking about real revenue solutions, for example, for the fact that $500 million, it's $500 million, are being paid to Wall Street banks by deals made by this appointed board that were bad deals, risky deals that are now costing those students.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, yesterday the mayor goes to the finance committee, investment committee, and strikes this deal where the city of Chicago is going to be paying 8.5% interest on $800 million. Worth of, I mean, that's twice what the average person pays with a mortgage. So, I mean, is this financial catastrophe tied into the school negotiations?
Well, I think what this shows is that the city's reaching or the CPS is reaching its limits on finances, and people don't have trust. So they have to demand a massive interest rate just to give CPS money. But I think the big story really is about how you've got these two groups of power: the administration and the teachers union fighting like crazy. And who's left out of this discussion are the children and the families. And I think that's really what's sad about this, is that you've got the corruption, the mismanagement, the failure in finances, the unfunded pensions. Where are the kids in this discussion? And if they were to strike again, I think for me, that much power in the power of an administration and a union to strike on children twice in two contract negotiations in a row, I think it's despicable, frankly.
And we've heard twice in the last couple of weeks that Governor Rauner has threatened a state takeover. Dorothy, is that plausible?
Well, when you talked to both sides about that. They both kind of chuckle and say, no way is that going to happen. You know, Rauner, I think he would have a very, very difficult time getting the teachers to agree to any kind of contract. I think he would have the same difficulty that the mayor is seeing, you know, and the school board is seeing. You know, when you talk to the board, they say the same thing. You know, we're not going to let Rauner come in here and do this. This is not going to happen. But I think parents need to be concerned. I've covered these meetings, and I can tell you the union is saying that their teachers are getting their winter coats out. You know, they are buying their winter coats and getting ready, getting prepared to sue the board if they have to. And if they file an unlabor practice suit, that could very well open the door for a strike sooner than later.
It also sets the clock running, right? It's a 90-day process. So we're looking at a strike, what, as early as May?
May. And I think really the whole discussion, it should really be the parents who should be striking against CPS and CTU. They're the ones that should be demanding the kind of respect that they get. And I think just for them to go out and strike one more time is really unfair, especially given the situation you have in Chicago, both economically and job-wise. You know, and the solutions of more taxes. You know, I think you're asking Chicagoans who are already nickel and dimed every day on bottled water to Netflix to you know, red light cameras. They can't afford to pay more.
Absolutely,
and I think you're asking them.
The wealthiest should, right? And that's what's not happening. You have almost every single state surrounding Illinois. The wealthiest families in those states pay a higher income tax than they do in Illinois. So what's happening here is that we're not getting the revenue we need from the folks who can afford to pay that revenue. Parents and working families absolutely should not be asked to be nickeled and dimed anymore. But
they are being.
Well, and what we need to, that's because we don't have progressive revenue solutions where we're saying that the wealthiest should be paying their fair share. So we've got money coming into the schools, investing in communities. And right now you've got good quality schools in wealthy neighborhoods because parents are able to fundraise and put in all this additional support into those schools. What happens to all the families and communities that can't do that? So what the teachers are doing is really pushing for making sure that there's quality education for every child in the school.
While we have a war of words on this teachers issue here in Chicago, we've got a real war going on in the streets of Chicago, and the crime figures have just come out for January. We've had nearly 300 shootings, 292 shootings just in January, 51 homicides. This is the most since the year 2000, the most in 16 years. And some police are complaining about what they're calling the ACLU effect, that they are holding off on making these stops of people in the street because they don't want to show up on the evening news. Dorothy, you work on the evening news. Do the police have a point here?
You know, I can see both sides. I think they're absolutely right because we get the video, we get the phone calls. I can tell the police officers, we get emails, tips every day about I have the cell phone video, this happened to my kid, I have a complaint. So there's a lot of pushback, and I've talked to police officers, and I know that they are concerned. They're scared. You know, they're feeling like that they have, the people in the community not only don't trust them anymore, but they are afraid that anything they do is going to end up on the evening news, and they have a right to be concerned about that because it will end up on the evening news. However, when you look at the other side of it, for so long, those of us in the news, whatever the police said, we went with it. You know, if they told us that this is the way the shooting went down, we went, oh, okay, and we reported that. If they said to us the kid had a gun, we went, oh, okay, and we reported that. So, you know, I mean, they kind of made this unfortunate bed for themselves because for years, we, the media, just went along with it. These videotapes come out, and now we sit back there and have to question, well, wait a minute, was it a gun? Was it a cell phone? We don't automatically take what they say.
But is there a backlash now that's actually slowing down enforcement, very similar to what we saw in Baltimore and New York City after similar episodes there?
I think it's very hard to draw any conclusions about a one-month period. It's a horrible period of murders and crime. I think the bigger issue when we talk about crime in Chicago is what opportunities do people have outside, right? Are they getting more job opportunities? Are they getting more abilities to go to school? And all the policies that impact that diminish the job creation, that diminish the power of entrepreneurs to create jobs so that these young people can get jobs. The more problems we have, and I think it's coming out, the more problems we have, the more crime we have. And we had a report recently come out very sad about how nearly 50% of all 19 to 24-year-olds in Chicago don't go to school or don't work.
They can't find a job, is what it said. 88% of them looking for a job and they can't find a job.
Right.
It didn't say that they were just sitting.
No, I'm sorry, I don't mean sitting. That they can't find the jobs, and I think that's the sad part. That opens the door to crime, sadly.
And one of the casualties of this rising crime in Chicago is the popularity or the approval rating of Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel. New Tribune polls just come out, shows that Mayor Emanuel's approval rating among Chicagoans is at an all-time low. Only 27% approve of the mayor's job performance, 63% disapprove. This is the lowest level of any mayor going back to his honor, Richard J. Daley. And Amisha, how can the mayor recover from this politically?
I'm not sure that he can. I mean, I think what you see is a huge level of mistrust in communities across the city due to the horrific mishandling of the Laquan McDonald shooting and raising lots of questions of many other shootings. And you see, like now, suddenly cases from a few years ago starting to resurface back up, the city continuing to be forced to release additional videos that they were sitting and holding back on. And I think this all adds up to the question, too, of how out of touch is the mayor in what's happening in communities? That was always a question for him that he struggled with. And this continues to show that, like, if you're not actually spending time listening to the needs of communities and actually wanting to respond to those needs, people are going to be really unsatisfied. We're at a new era of wanting to hold elected officials accountable with demands for the mayor to resign or State's Attorney Anita Alvarez to resign. And these are coming from a real place of outrage of like, wait, if you're not doing this job right, you're not qualified to do this job, you shouldn't have this job.
There was a glimmer of good news for the mayor in this survey for all the bad news. One bright spot, 51% said he should not resign, 41% said he should step down. Should the mayor take some comfort in this, Ted?
He might want to take a little comfort because he's looking for something of comfort there. No, I think what this shows is people's dissatisfaction with what's happening in Chicago, not just Rahm, but I think overall. You know, we're talking about the teachers, a potential teacher strike. We're talking about the crime statistics and the handling of the crime and, you know, not sharing information. I think it shows that people want change. They need change. The question is going to be, what kind of change do you go after? And I would argue that the change that people need is not one where the administration gets more power, not one where the teachers union or the police union, who has been reporting things in ways that we find are maybe not quite right. There's a lot of things that say that we shouldn't give all that power to all these government entities. Really, the power belongs to the people, and they should have more choices about where they go to school. They should have more opportunity for jobs. Entrepreneurs should be unleashed, not limited by the government through higher taxes and more regulations. And so really what it is we need something where the people and the small businesses and entrepreneurs are unleashed rather than more and more government control and power over the people. I think that's where we're failing.
That's obviously a philosophical debate. Yes.
I think that 51% feels like so many of my friends do, is that you want Rahm to stay in place because he's the best person to fix it. He knows what happened. He knows what he did. He knows what he didn't do. He knows where all the bodies are buried. And so he is the best person in the position, you know.
Is he doing some of the right things? I mean, he's brought in, for example, Charles Ramsey, former head of the Philadelphia Police. He's changing the training in the police departments. He's meeting with community leaders. Is he starting to make some inroads here to do the right things, Dorothy?
I think he is. I think he is. You know, I think he is addressing the issues. I think that he has no choice but to fix this. And, you know, I think bringing Ramsey in, somebody who used to be in the Chicago Police Department at that time, has an outside view. I think that is a good move. I think the Department of Justice, I think working with the Department of Justice, I know that the department is going around talking to a number of different community groups, and they pretty much have free reign. Of course, they would anyway. But I think him finally saying, okay, do what you have to do, I think that's a good move. I think we're going to see some change. I think it's going to take some time, but I think we're going to see some change.
I have to put you on hold 1 second here. We only have a few seconds left. I'm going to put each of you, ask each of you to wear the hat of senior advisor to the mayor. If there's one thing that you'd recommend, one piece of advice in about 10 seconds, I'm going to go down the line. Amisha, what's the one thing the mayor should do?
He should resign.
He's not going to do that. Ted,
I would say he
you?
needs to pass major reforms everywhere, not raise taxes, but pass big reforms that fix the city going forward.
Dorothy, you got 10 seconds to wrap it up.
I think he should talk to the community. I think he should really get out there and hold those small sessions of talking to people. He said he was going to listen before. This is a time more than ever before when he still needs to continue to listen to what the community is saying.
All right, Mayor, you've got plenty of good free advice right here. So thanks to our guests, Dorothy Tucker, Ted Dabrowski, and Amisha Patel. In Englewood, a group of young people are ditching guns and lacing up gloves, all because one woman wanted to help reduce violence in their neighborhood. Here's Robin Robinson with that story.
We in the ring, we box. When you done with the fight, we still show each other love.
One question, what you really need to pocket, and ain't ready to party.
So we put music and boxing together, and we created a family-oriented program, whereas kids can come here and feel like they have family instead of looking for it out on the streets.
As described by Rosalind Collins and Ivory Hall, Crushers Club is an alternative to gangs and life in the streets. A boxing gym combined with a music studio, rehabilitating youth one punch and one note at a time.
Our first song is Blackbird by Jessica.
Crushers Club creator Sally Hazelgrove has devoted the past 15 years to helping at-risk kids in Chicago's Englewood community.
I was living on the north side of Chicago, and my mother had passed away, and I was lacking, I think, the true purpose of why I was here on earth. Very randomly, just knew that, okay, now I can go to Englewood, because I had seen Englewood on the TV a lot and seen a lot of shootings and killings. I came out here, and after probably a couple of weeks, I pretty much knew then this was where I was supposed to be.
In search of a strong hook to engage the young people, Hazelgrove took to the streets and just started talking to the residents.
I decided to interview all the young men on the corners. What would you like to do you don't have access to? And boxing was the #1 answer, actually.
Sally said, did I want to box one day? I'm like, yeah. So she put me in a boxing ring, and I got a knockout. And then she was like, can you keep coming? Then I was like, yeah. So I kept coming.
People have come to me and said they felt like, well, you're taking them and having them do something violent. Boxing is a sport, first and foremost, and it requires discipline and a lot of hard work.
With discipline as one of the main anchors, Hazelgrove has built a model that she thinks can save not only the youth, but save us millions of dollars spent in the criminal justice system.
In our model, we found a way, instead of incarcerating them, to redirect them for way under $5,000 per youth. And after studying the gang model and also working with a lot of practitioners in law enforcement and involved also working with this demographic, I decided to duplicate the model and do exactly what they did, except instead of drugs and guns, I used boxing and music.
As boxing did for Ivory Hall, music and poetry did for Rosalind Collins.
I would fight the boys and throw them everywhere, and I would be suspended like every other week.
I brought her into the club, and this girl is something very, very special. She actually is a leader in the making. She went from being one of the worst kids at that school to fighting all the time, really, suspended excessively. Her grades were down. She just graduated with all A's and 1 B.
Through boxing and music, and based on a peer mentoring model, Crushers Club has been turning lives around for over a decade.
If I didn't come here, my answer would be I would be dead or in jail.
I'm going to be focused. I want to keep my straight A's. I'm going to be a good student this time around because I have people in my corner now.
Music and boxing, what a combination punch. That concludes tonight's show. You are now in the loop. Next week, a new political force is rising in Chicago. Young African-American and Latino activists mobilizing in new ways and challenging the old guard. Tune in for the full story next Thursday. Until then, I'm Chris Bury.